As the UK started to go into lockdown back in March 2020 and the severity of the pandemic unfolded, I embarked upon a year-long photographic project to try and document this moment in time. I used our daily exercise allowance to photograph friends, family, and neighbours in our local community. As time passed, I focused on the younger and elder generations affected in similar ways by restrictions during the pandemic. They shared worries, anxieties, boredom, frustrations, and an endless longing to be with friends and family again. I spent many days photographing my elderly mum, who was isolating alone, and she was fearful. I took this photograph in May when we were still advised not to hug our elderly relatives. This is a portrait of my 83-year-old mum giving my daughter, her granddaughter, an imaginary hug with their arms outstretched but not touching. Hello, my name's Natasha. I'm a British artist and photographer based in London. I'm absolutely thrilled that the photograph I took of my elderly mum during the first lockdown was chosen to be part of this fantastic book. It was taken during a time when restrictions were easing, but we still had quite confusing and complicated tier systems and a list of rules of what we were meant to do and not do. But at that particular time, no, it wasn't last May, it was May 2020, I wanted to photograph my mum, imagining she was hugging her grandchildren. It was a very difficult time for my mum, who was isolating alone, and she really, really missed the physical contact. Normally she's a very sociable and optimistic person, and those first couple of months were very, very difficult for her. So I would try and walk to her house every day and photograph her to cheer her up, and to provide some sort of distraction, I suppose, for her during those bleak months. And this particular image I took was of her imagining she was hugging her granddaughter, and it was a very poignant moment. The restrictions were causing all sorts of difficulties and sadness for so many people around the world, but for us as well, it was a particularly difficult moment in time. Beyond thrilled that the photograph was chosen, I've actually never really shown any of my photographic work before lockdown, and I've certainly never done any documentary photography work before. But I just knew instinctively, as soon as we went into lockdown, I had to take my camera and photograph every single moment of the day, inside the house and outside the house, according to obviously our guidelines, government guidelines and restrictions that were placed upon us. So I turned this project actually into a year-long project of the pandemic, and I self-published my book last year as well. It's called Together Apart, and in that book are several themes, whether it be empty streets or I did a series called Postcards from the Pandemic, which were sort of collages of gloves and masks contrasted with the beautiful nature that was flourishing at the same time. And then I really focused on a series which was close to my heart, because I have a teenage daughter who was also going through her own anxieties during our third lockdown in the UK. So I photographed her and many young, and I turned these portraits. Although I photographed them using my digital camera, and of course in colour, I turned them into black and white because I felt that was very much the mood that everyone was going through then. And that series was called Social Separation. I photographed them all behind glass, and they're all alone, gazing out, looking longingly, for their freedom again. So I would almost say that I was an amateur photographer. Even though I photographed all my life, I probably was an amateur photographer, and now I would hope to see myself as a professional photographer. And I'm really interested in telling stories that tell interesting, important stories. And yeah, delighted. It's in the book with all the other incredible photographers. Really, really thrilled. Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with me today. Now let's jump into the interviews from artists featured in this chapter. All right, I hope you joined that episode and learned something new. All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode and took out some valuable information. I can't read that. I'll just read it. All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can find the artists and their photos on Scopio. I hope that you take some valuable information from this episode and apply it into your own work and realize how resilient you actually are. Don't forget to tune in. All right, I hope you enjoyed that last episode and learned something new. Don't forget to tune in to the next episode to see what other crazy, incredible, creative, and empowering lessons you can learn from the photos and Facebook.